Geek. Talking baseball every week. Because they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek. Those freaking White Sox edition. I'm John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Eric Gleeman of The Athletic.
Now, if you were subscribed to the Patreon, you would have heard a different word than freaking. That's really the only difference between the free show and the Patreon.
And did you by chance read Rand Buxton's story this morning?
I didn't. I'm not that much of a early I'm an early riser, but I'm zoned out for the first 3 hours of every day, basically. But I always read it when I get home.
I got to show you the headline.
Does it say freaking?
No, it does not.
Friggin'? This is good radio.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Yeah, here we go.
John. It says, Satan pleased with White Sox. Yeah.
It's fantastic. It's so brilliant.
That's on twinsdaily.com. Ramball Stu, former multiple-time guest, although not in a while. Maybe we should have him back.
We should probably have him back on.
Yeah. He's out of prison, right? He's available to do podcast.
A fair amount of that story talks about White Sox fans, being on parole or something.
Oh, well, then I really brought it back to that.
Watching the team in between court dates.
Is that, well, that's really just all, I'm not going to defend White Sox fans by any means. No. But that really is mostly based on that, brother, or
the father-son.
Right, from 15 years ago that beat up the first base coach. Was it the Royals' first base coach? I want to say something like that. Anyway, since last we spoke, the Twins won 3 out of 4 at home from the Royals, and then went to Chicago and lost the first 2 in a pretty frustrating fashion.
Right,
and
they're both very frustrating.
Appeared to be set to get swept at various points yesterday.
Also in frustrating fashion.
Well, yeah, and that was one of the. Even the win was very frustrating yesterday. I felt. I went over.
The last inning was nice.
Yesterday, I was scheduled to do Dan Barrero's show at 3:30, and the game started at 1:10. And so I was like, okay, well. And then they booked the Wild general manager Bill Guerin for 3:00 in studio for an hour. And so they said, can we do 4 with you? And I thought that's perfect because then I can wait till the game ends and then head over to KFAN because the games have been ending in 2.5 hours.
Sure.
Ended up the game ended in the 12th inning midway through my second segment live on the radio where we were like, there's a good pitch. It's like we're doing play-by-play even though you're not supposed to do that. But yeah, it was I'll make the same joke I made on the radio yesterday, which is if you can get the Twins line up to the 12th inning, they really explode offensively. It's those first 11 innings.
They just take a little time to warm up.
Yeah, it's like a car that needs extra time to warm up in the winter. But yeah, so we're going to talk a lot about the lineup, obviously, which is so up and down. I mean, I will say that when we previewed this White Sox series 4 days ago or whatever,
right,
we said, now look, they've been really bad and their ERA is horrendous. However, the actual names involved starting these games,
right?
Lucas Giolito, Dylan Cease, on and on. Kopech in the first
right,
game.
right.
These are legit guys, and in past years have been all-star caliber or better guys. So let's not go completely nuts. I think we saw some of that.
That was what has been most surprising to me about the White Sox this year. This team. Well, there's 2 things that have been surprising to me about them. The first is their bullpen's better than I thought it was going to be. but the second is that their rotation was just so much worse starting out the season than we thought they were going to be. And, the Twins ran into their 3 top guys, unfortunately. And it felt to me like we spent the first 2 weeks of the season saying, I don't know about this offense. And then the next 2 weeks of the season, we're like, offense is coming around. We did point out, I don't know if it was on the Patreon or last Friday, the first 2 weeks of the season, they ran into a lot of good pitchers. And the second 2 weeks of the season, they did not run into many good pitchers. And
true. They've also, however, been the best performance for a lot of pitchers this year.
Well,
in other words,
that's
we saw that with the White Sox. Now, Dylan Cease is not as bad as he's looked, although they got to Dylan Cease decently. And even Kopech, they worked.
Almost had him.
Right.
Larnick.
But, yeah, so I don't know.
Jeffers, right? Jeffers was the one
that ran into the
third base.
Yeah, that was when you're a backup catcher, making big things happen on the base pass should not be your priority.
Even more frustrating is it looks like he was safe to begin with.
Well, they had lost their challenge earlier in the game, right?
No, that was the one where they lost their challenge. It looked like he was safe, and they didn't overrun it. And then, Castro was safe at second base, and they'd lost their challenge.
Yeah, the running game ain't real improved from last year. In terms of
Molitor didn't work that magic during spring training.
Quantity, quality, efficacy, anything you want to do. Smartness, certainly, if that's a word. So they salvaged 1 of 3 in Chicago with a 12th inning win. As frustrating as it was for them not to be able to, Buxton hits the game. Correa hits a homer early. And then it's 2-1 for most of the game, and Buxton comes through yet again in a huge spot to tie the game with a homer. We're going to talk about him and the stretch he's had here.
And then Nick Gordon comes through in a big spot versus a left-hander in the 12th inning.
But that was much later.
Right.
As frustrating as it was then to have it 2-2 and the Twins to have tons of opportunities throughout that game, including in extra innings when you start each inning with a guy on second, obviously. The flip side was the bullpen was nails. I mean, first of all, Pablo Lopez was pretty good, too.
Right, you're right. Yes.
Except for
really
one
good
pitch to Eloy Jimenez, and then he went 7 innings with 8 strikeouts, 1 walk, and he looked good. And the bullpen came in and was constantly in trouble, some of it of their own making, and some of it because of the extra inning rules.
Right.
And then Baldelli was just pushing buttons like crazy. They intentionally walked 5 White Sox hitters, including Benintendi in front of Billy Hamilton twice in the exact same situation. Right. The first time Billy Hamilton, who Twins fans may remember for his stretch in September on the Twins.
10-day stretch in September on the Twins or something, right?
Incredibly fast. He's the all-time record holder for steals in a minor league season with like 130 or something like that. And early in his career, he was an everyday player for the Reds, and then they realized, he's incredibly fast and a really good center fielder, but he cannot hit a lick. And so later in his career, including his stint with the Twins, he's basically just a pinch runner and defensive replacement. But the White Sox used him as a pinch runner, and he caused havoc on the bases.
He was great.
He tends to do, except then they ran out of bench players, and there was the extra innings. And so Benintendi, who's killed the Twins, I feel like, for his whole career,
exactly right,
was up in front of him.
Just a smart at-bat every time.
Right. He's just not a high strikeout guy.
So often hits it to the opposite field, just absolutely takes what you give him. He is fun to watch.
Except you look at his overall numbers and you go, how is this guy not that good?
So that is what I was going to bring that up at one point too. Like every time somebody wants to talk to me about Kepler's contract, the comparison they want to do is sort of, you see what the numbers that Benintendi puts up. You see the numbers that Kepler puts up. Benintendi got a 5-year, $75 million deal. What could Kepler get on the open market, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm always like, but
$75 million. Yeah. Well, first of all, people pretty much paying that contract that the White Sox
I agree. I agree with you 100%. Right. The point being that the $10 million option, 1-year option on him is a no-brainer to some extent. Is what those people
Kepler
are trying to bring down. Yeah, the Kepler. Right. No, I agree with you. I'm the same way. I'm like, but, and I felt it's interesting that you bring up that the same thing that we say about Kepler, people say about Benintendi, which is like, he looks like such a good player.
Right. How is he not better?
How do we not see the numbers?
And he's had some good years, but
I think, but it feels to me like his WPA has got to be better than that, better than his numbers or something like that. Because he just always
Kepler's is not.
Maybe he's just really good against the Twins.
Yeah, I mean, there's some guys who just
right,
kill the Twins. Not that Salvador Perez hasn't been a great player throughout his career, but like you would think Salvador Perez is Johnny Bench based on what he's done against the Twins. But so anyway, twice in the same spot, they intentionally walked Benintendi, who's a really tough guy to pitch to in sort of a do or die spot because he's always going to put the ball in play.
Right.
And in both spots, they put him on intentionally to pitch to Billy Hamilton, who is such a nothing offensively that the first time he tried to bunt with 2 outs, by the way, and popped it up.
I'm surprised it wasn't 2 strikes as well.
Well, there was 1 strike. I think he took a strike. And then the second time, he seriously looked like if you put like a high school player up there against Emilio Pagan, which I'll give Emilio Pagan credit. He threw a scoreless inning in a very big spot.
And frankly, he was one of the least dramatic of the relievers.
That's true,
overall. Yeah. You say the relievers were nails, and they were because they ended up with scoreless innings. But they also seemed to walk people at the beginning of innings, or it was always
5 of their 7 walks were intentional.
Well, okay, I suppose. Right.
So they pitched. What did they pitch? 5 innings. They allowed 1 hit.
You mean yesterday? You're talking about yesterday?
Yes.
Yeah.
5 innings yesterday.
Right, yes.
I'm only talking about yesterday when I say they were nails.
Right.
They were not nails earlier in this year. But the swings that Hamilton put on Pagan, I feel like if this was flipped and the Twins were the White Sox, or Twins fans were White Sox fans, they'd have to have like lobotomies to make that happen. But I don't know why we say stuff like that. I'm sure there's some White Sox fans listening. I don't really mean this, unless I do, in which case maybe
those White Sox fans in Iowa.
Well, if there's any of those, I do mean it. But think how frustrating that would have been from a White Sox fan standpoint to watch in the 10th and 12th inning as you have no moves to make and you have basically like a non-hitter up there hitting in the biggest spots of the game, and both times it worked out in the Twins' favor, obviously, and that played a huge part. The other big play was...
Though I will say this, that's often used as a criticism when you put in a pinch runner, right? Like we've done that with Baldelli. We're like, is it really worth it? With Hamilton, it's worth it. Like when they put in Hamilton as a pinch runner in that situation, it was damn near another run. Like he makes his way around the bases for you.
Yeah, except it didn't. It wasn't.
He got as far as third.
Right.
That's a few different times.
That's the beauty of baseball.
The other thing about that is that if you end up getting him as the third out, you walk Benintendi in front of him. Well, he's the guy sitting on second base,
which is what happened.
Next inning, right? Which is not where you want him to be.
But the other huge moment from that game was Hanser Alberto, who made a big error at Target Field to basically hand the Twins a win earlier this season, is not a big fan favorite with the White Sox in a month into his Chicago career. Swinging through a pitch for strike 3 that hit him.
Yes.
And I don't mean like he fouled it into himself. I mean like if he would have just stood there, it would have beaned him.
Right.
And he would have been on first base, and it would have been game over because the bases were loaded against Brock Stewart.
Yep.
That is also a huge spot. It reminded me kind of the Brandon Kinsler jersey situation in game 163, however many years ago that was, where it's just like, wow, what a strange play in the biggest possible or highest possible leverage situation. But yeah, I mean, one win is one win, but it feels so much different to win the finale of a 3-game series in Chicago when you did not play well at all versus getting swept all 3 would have been, look, they still would. Here's the thing. Both the first 2 losses of that series, Cleveland lost that same day both times.
Right, yes.
And so the Twins are up 3.5 games right now.
They gained.
I guess. Well, they didn't gain ground, but they're more likely to win the division because they've eliminated 3 games from the schedule.
They gained ground since Tuesday.
Right. They're 3.5 up on Cleveland, and Cleveland is 14-17 with like a negative, 20 run differential. Right. And look, I feel like we might be having this conversation every week for the whole season where we say, well, we still view Cleveland as dangerous and they might still be favored to win the division despite the slow start. But that's what makes this upcoming series in Cleveland, 3 games that starts tonight, so interesting.
This is not a series. This is not a series like the White Sox in that they've got their top 3 guys going against the Twins either. Right. They've got their
Bieber pitched 2 days ago,
right?
And McKenzie's hurt, and
what's his name is hurt too. CC, no, not CC.
CC Sabathia. No. I heard he's healthy.
I think Dylan Cease is who I was thinking about. No, who's the guy? The guy who's hurt.
I don't know.
I'm blanking. Battenfield has not been very good as a rookie.
They've had to turn to their, much like the Twins, I guess, their 6th, 7th, 8th starters already. A lot of whom are, not Bailey Ober-esque. Right. They're more, not even Louis Varland-esque. They're more, Brent Hedrick-esque, which, can be a good thing, especially Cleveland. Whenever they call up a pitcher, I always like to watch their first couple appearances because I think to myself, is this guy a random guy or is this guy 10 years from now going to
be... is the guy I'm thinking of.
No, he's not good anyway, so that doesn't matter.
He has been good.
Look up his numbers. You're
not that, I don't mean this last year. I mean, I remember him from the previous things. So. You don't remember him being good? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got him wrong.
I'll take the over on whatever his career ERA is in your brain.
He had a 2.84 ERA this year, but it was 4.92 last year, 3.84 the year before. Yeah. Career ERA 4.
Yeah, I mean,
4.04.
It's not a big loss. But the key with Cleveland will be the same as it was past couple years, which is they're going to try to, I would say pitching and defense, although their pitching is shaky, but what they're going to try to do offensively is endlessly put the ball in play, put pressure on the defense. They run the bases, they steal bases, they go first to third. They try to test all your outfield arms with Quan and other fast runners.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of slow guys, although they've added Josh Bell to Naylor as sort of the more traditional sluggers, but neither of them are really doing much. They have Jose Ramirez, who I will continue to say is the most underrated superstar in baseball and probably the best player in the American League Central over the last
now on a long-term deal
5
with
to
them
whatever
too.
years.
They got him in an extension too.
The key is, and this is true of every team, I guess to some extent, but the key is do not fall behind by even a run against Cleveland like in the 6th or 7th inning, because what happens is they just have an endless clown car of relievers who throw 98 with a slider. And it ends with Clase, who's sort of a final boss in the 9th inning. But, Karinchak has been a lot more hittable since Baldelli made the umps check his flowing locks last year. Yeah. And they've just shown a few more, dents in the armor here in the early going. They've also, and this was what was maddening about Cleveland last year, I felt, was while the Twins were leading the league in days lost to injury, Cleveland lost the fewest days to injury of any team in baseball. They've already lost, more key players to more days, it seems like, including Tristan McKenzie, their number 2 starter, than they did all of last season. And so the Twins have not been healthy by any means. We're going to talk a little bit more about the rotation injuries since those are become official since last we spoke. But the fact that the Guardians are having to dip into their minor league depth already, are having to play shorthanded already, can't just trot out the same 9 day after day after day as a lineup, which I remember one of the criticisms were, Terry Francona uses a consistent lineup. Terry Francona didn't have 50 dudes on the injured list at all points last year. So I don't know.
As I recall, even before they went to the Yankees series and lost 2 out of 3, we had gone through I think on Monday's Patriot show, went through the last 4 or 5 series.
Yeah, they have not played well.
They haven't won a series since the beginning of April.
Yeah.
Or middle of April, at least.
Now, we said even worse about the White Sox heading into this series in Chicago, and they were, very close to sweeping all 3 games from the Twins in very frustrating fashion. So we'll see. I mean, no series in the first week of May is that important, realistically. But when the Twins are looking good but not great, and the rest of the division looks horrendous to the point that Cleveland is really the only team, I think, that has more than 5% playoff odds on Fangraphs right now. They're the competition, and they're 14-17 and have some of the flaws that we just talked about. If you go in there and win 2 out of 3, I'm not saying it really
doesn't significantly change the
door on them,
but gives you a 4.5 game lead.
But it kind of sinks them a little bit further into this quicksand that they're in to start the season. Yeah. It makes climbing out of that a little bit trickier. It puts some doubt in their heads. I think this is I'm very curious to see how these two teams stack up, because we saw it a lot last year. I mean, those games last year in Cleveland were just disastrous for the Twins, especially that series.
It was actually very reminiscent of these games versus the White Sox. The Twins could score a few runs, but not enough, and then end up blowing the game late because the bullpen gets. Sometimes it's a slight leak, sometimes it's a blow up, but Cleveland also feels to me like the team that, they're a team that can be very good because their offense doesn't have a terribly high ceiling, but doesn't have a terribly low floor.
Well, that's how it's intended to be built.
That's exactly right. And so that works really well if you've got a dominant pitching staff. If your pitching staff is banged up a little bit and you're relying on your 6th and 7th and 8th guys, now you're losing 2 out of 3 instead of winning.
They're in the same frustrating spot that has put the Twins in since the second half of last year, which is part of the problem and part of it magnified the short hooks for starting pitchers last year. It magnified Emilio Pagan's issues and the non-Duran relievers issues last year. And we've seen some of that this year with the bullpen, which is a lot of this stuff that seems like a weakness for the Twins in terms of, their setup men have been, Griffin Jacks has been a little shaky and all this stuff. Well, it's only a weakness because the lineup scores 2 runs.
Right. Yes.
If the lineup scores 4 runs, which is still not great, but it's something, then the entire situation that the relievers find themselves in, not to mention it's probably going to be different usage for the relievers in terms of who's pitching when, changes completely. And when your lineup is not consistently scoring at least 4 or 5 runs in most games, which is like league average, and the Twins have not been, even last season it was really extreme, the kind of 4 games where they'd score 2 runs a game and then they'd have 9 and then they'd go back. And we've seen that sort of more on a weekly basis this year than a game by game basis. And it just puts so much pressure on, especially the relievers, 6th, 7th, 8th inning, 9th inning, because there's no margin for error in these spots. And I mean, once you get to extra innings, there's literally there's less than no margin for error because you're putting a runner on second base. But it's the thing I love about baseball is it's a series of...
At Cleveland's the same thing, only with the pitching.
Right. Baseball is a series of individual matchups, which I love, which makes it so much more valuable or more insightful to analyze it statistically than all other sports. Right. But it's a series of individual matchups that sort of cascade onto each other. Right. Yeah, so it's batter versus pitcher. Then the ball gets in play and it's ball versus fielder. But then also the individual matchups are affected by the other individual matchups. So if the lineup is empty, it's just constantly a tie game or a 1-run game. And then every pitch from a reliever in those individual matchups can potentially turn the game. So I feel like I say this, and this series probably will be like a bunch of 12-5 games or something. I'm expecting it to be like 2-1 games. So we'll see. Yeah. I don't know. I like getting at least like a sparring match of sorts early in the season against the White Sox and Cleveland. Like, not that it's meaningful, not that these two out of 3 losing in Chicago has some huge meaning beyond just 3 games. And the same is true of this Cleveland series coming up. But it's like, I like to at least kind of test your gloves, test your reach, test your whatever against these
same
teams.
Thing that we said about, facing the Yankees, facing Houston. True, it does give you a meament. So
before we get into... We're going to talk Buxton. We're going to talk Kirilloff. We're going to talk the rotation, maybe even some bullpen. Let's get a couple of our sponsors out of the way. One of them, Grody Beef.
We have a winner.
Yeah, we were ready to announce a winner in our first ever.
We had the meat raffle. It ended Wednesday night at midnight.
Was the winner Christine B?
It was not.
Or C bonus?
It was David Campbell.
David Campbell. Who's David Campbell? You said that like it's somebody we should know.
AP writer for.
Is that really who it was?
Exactly who it was.
Oh, he should be ineligible. By virtue of sitting by me in the press box. Is it really David Campbell?
David Campbell won it. Yes, he had the beef delivered to him yesterday.
Oh, I was going to say we could hand deliver it. Just put it in the press box for him. That'd be a funny thing.
He had it delivered yesterday. I sent Joe Grody the.
Is that for
the
real?
winner? Yeah, we really did. David Campbell won it.
Jeez.
Right.
There's going to be an investigation into this. At least Hayes didn't win. That would have been.
Well, I didn't know David Campbell actually listened to the podcast. So
yeah, I'm shocked by that actually because I don't even know why he listens to me when I'm sitting next to him.
It was delivered to him yesterday because they do deliver to the Twin Cities, and they had a run yesterday already figured out. And so they just dropped it off at David Campbell's place yesterday. So, and the $300 worth of steaks. And I got to tell you, I have it. They're making another run today, and I know that because they're delivering to me.
But you paid for them. You didn't win anything. Quote unquote win anything.
No, I didn't win anything. I'm paying for it.
So yeah, Grody Beef. We've talked about them before, but it's a family farm in the Northfield area since the 1800s. It's 6th generation. Right. They, Angus beef cattle that is high quality, responsibly raised, diet of grass, pasture, and then grass and corn, hormone-free, antibiotic-free meat. And then they just have all the cuts that you would want, ribeye, T-bone, strip, sirloin, all that stuff.
Spring bundle for like $80. It was like 5 ground. Anyway, that's what we bought, the spring bundle. There's a number of steaks and a roast and some hamburger. It's fantastic.
And if you go to Grody Beef, which is GROTE beef.com, any order placed using the promo code Gleeman will get 20% off your order.
Yeah, so it's already a special like on those spring bundles and other
they
stuff. They
will hand deliver it anywhere in the metro area. Yeah. And you can pick it up on the farm if you're closer to them,
too. If you want to come see the farm, you can go do that.
We should have made Dave do that.
It's not a bad week.
Go drive up there and do it.
Not a bad week. I think Grody Beef is GROTEBEEF.com.
I really wish they would have not delivered it, and I could have just put it next to his laptop in the press box and say,
I should have had them deliver it to you.
Figure it out.
That would have been awesome.
What are you going to do with this now? 300 pounds of beef or whatever. Okay. And then our next sponsor was Sunday.
Yes.
Which is lawn care services.
It is time to get out
hopefully,
there.
yeah.
We hopefully.
There's been a few teases.
I'm seeing some buds on the trees. I'm seeing that we're going to have flowers on the trees outside the Ameriprise building soon. It's one of my favorite parts of the year. And that means your lawn needs some help.
Because of the Jekyll and Hyde nature of the weather the past month,
right.
It's possible your lawn needs even more help than a normal year. Right. And so Sunday can help you with that. The Sunday, like the day, Sunday. GetSunday.com/Gleeman.
Right.
The premise is you can enter in your address and they will send you like all the details about your plot of land, which includes like the size, so how much stuff you'll need to put on it.
Right.
But then also like they can tailor what you're putting on it specifically to that type of grass and that type of soil.
And then they'll tell you exactly when to put it on it. And that's the day that you just go hook up your hose to their little package thing and spray your grass.
Yes, you can have the best lawn in the neighborhood.
Check out this deal.
By going to getsunday.com/Gleeman. And if you do that, our listeners will get 50% off their first box. So you can get started today for as little as $55 when you go to getsunday.com/Gleeman at checkout. That's 50% off your first box at getsunday, SUNDAY.com
50%. Yeah. Those of you who put it off to the last minute are getting paid.
God, can you... I'm going to make fun of Dave for listening to this show so much.
Now, it's possible. We also put out the Gleeman of the Geek Twitter account.
Yeah, maybe he just saw it.
Possible he saw it on
Let me
that.
just win this meat. Why not?
I do love the idea of you just showing up with a box of meat to the press box.
Just drop it on the...
I love the idea of you walking through the security gate with it. I love that you just drop it off on his chair at the press box.
Hand it to him when we're in Baldelli's office for pregame. Here you go. Here you go. Do whatever you want with
Better
it.
yet, we should have not announced it. Yeah. Say, we have a winner, but we're not announcing because we want to surprise the winner, and then have Baldelli award it to him.
Well, that might be.
Rocco, I got something for you.
I like we act like the Twins Clubhouse is my playground, and I'm just like telling guys, why not?
Rocco would love to give Dave Campbell a box.
Why not make Buxton and Correa do it at that point? Since we're just dreaming of me telling people to do things.
How about Mitch or Dustin or Nina?
We could maybe get Caleb Thielbar, whose nickname, as assigned by Ramball Stew, is Meat Raffle,
and grew up near.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let's see. It was surreal to look at the box score yesterday. I didn't even realize this in real time because I was watching it in Barrero's studio at KFAN, actually, which was weird enough. The winning pitcher, Emilio Pagan, as we just mentioned. The losing pitcher, Alex Kirilloff. And I thought, where was Ron Davis watching somewhere at least? Like, these are two of the worst performing owners of the worst seasons in relief history for the Twins.
Somebody on Twitter sent us a screen print of the MLB app where it shows column A versus Pagan.
Yeah, it was me, I think. So yeah, that was interesting.
Oh my God!
An old friend Alex Colme, who signed a minor league deal with them like 10 days ago, he appeared in 2 out of the 3 games.
And did solid work for the Twins again.
Yeah.
Better work than he did for the Twins.
He finally helped the Twins.
He is the sleeper agent.
Yeah. Except you could make somebody a sleeper agent. You don't have to tank one of your own season. I guess that makes it more believable.
Sure,
yeah,
that's right,
okay.
that's right.
I get it.
It's a long con.
Yeah, boy, is it. Yeah. Well, anyway, any day we can mention Ron Davis on the podcast is always a winning day. The 5 intentional walks issued by Baldelli were the most in Twins history. They're not the most in American League history. There were 2 times, I looked this up last night. Twice in American League history, a team has issued 7 intentional walks in a game. And I say American League history because prior to a couple years ago, when there was no DH in the National League, intentionally walking the 8-hitter to get to a pitcher in the 9th spot was fairly common or much more common in that league. So that's why I focused on the American League. Can you imagine watching a game that there was 2 more intentional walks by a team than we saw yesterday? Like, that must have just been like an acid trip. Like, they were just putting guys on base over and over?
Do you remember if any of them were recent?
No. One was 1963 Angels, and the other was like 1930-something Yankees.
Okay.
But yeah, for a guy who was accused, Baldelli, of just kind of sitting on his hands a lot or managing by the spreadsheet, 5 intentional walks in the last 4 innings.
Yeah, I guess
is
that's not exactly the way to ingratiate yourself to your fan base, though, by intentionally walking.
But it worked.
It did
every
work.
single time. It worked after all 5 intentional walks. The next batter they got out. which is including at least 2 innings, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hell of a way to be. The overall takeaway, though, I feel like from the series was that this team is not nearly good enough to be as sloppy defensively and running the bases as they are, which is what we often talked about last year. I think the defense is not nearly as bad as it was last year at times, but the base running is every bit as mistake prone, even though poor Gilberto Celestino is on the IL.
IL right now. Yeah.
I was going to say St. Paul, but he's actually been in the Twins clubhouse quite a bit because he's just on the 60-day IL or whatever. But they're just not nearly, especially when they're not hitting. There's just not enough margin for error for them to be running into outs, whether it's like the Jeffers play or the Willie Castro situation. Like their stolen base percentage, they've stolen 6 bases. I think they've been thrown out 8 times on the bases. Right. And that's with Buxton back-to-back games stealing a base, which he hadn't done that in back-to-back games, I'm going to guess, in 3 years. Right. So, yeah, that's a good sign for Buxton, which I guess we can just talk about Buxton here. I don't have some big piece of news with Byron Buxton. I just feel like when he's on one of these stretches like he is right now, we should talk about him because it's not something you see all the time in baseball.
I mean, he's basically been on that stretch, though, since day one, except for the week after he landed on his face.
Here's some crazy numbers that I crunched last night before going to bed. Byron Buxton, in the first 11 games of the season, hit .302 with an .845 OPS, including a couple of really clutch.
I'm surprised it's that low. Honestly,
it's pretty good.
Right.
Then he collided with Lennon Sosa at second base against the White Sox at Target Field, and it looked as though he died. I
thought he may have broken his neck.
Honestly, I thought he broke about 10 different things. Right. I remember after the game, we asked Baldelli, how is he doing? And he goes, I don't know. There was so many different body parts to check on that it's going to take a while until we know. In the 4 games after that collision, because he played the next day in New York, which is amazing. I would have lost so much money betting against that happening. He went 0 for 15 with 11 strikeouts in the next 4 games. And it was like, oh, well, here he goes again. He's hurt. He's struggling again. Then, since then, he's played 13. Yesterday was the 13th game he's played since then. He's hitting .306 with a 1210 OPS.
There you go.
Now, OPS is just on base percentage plus slugging percentage. Right. So you can do the math in your head there, how you would get to 1210 in a way that is not incredibly impressive, and you can't do it. Right. You're either a 400 on base and an 800 slugging, or a 500 on base. I mean, there's no way to do it that you don't look like Barry Bonds. And so for the season, including an 0 for 15, 11 strikeout stretch. Right. And by the way, the season is 32 games long, so it's not like it's been 100 games. He's got a .350 on base percentage, including all of a sudden he's drawing walks in bunches.
Well, here's why.
Which he's never done before in his entire life.
They're pitching around him.
Well, yeah, although that's been the case for a while. I think if you look at, he had made some subtle improvements compared to the first 3 or 4 years of his career when the book on Buxton was he swings at everything. And you can get him to chase, similar to Torrey Hunter early in his career, or even Michael Dyer, get ahead of him and then just throw him slop down and away, and he will just swing over it. He
that ain't happening anymore.
He gradually kind of weaned himself off of that, which is common, as you get.
You still see it occasionally. You see it for everybody occasionally.
He's a swing and miss guy. Right. But the difference, I think, is he's taken that to one more step. I think he's done a really good job laying off high fastballs, and he's done a good job early in counts laying off kind of iffy breaking balls where I think in his head he thinks, I could hit this, but there's going to be better opportunities later in this at bat.
Yeah, he's gotten pickier.
And then you add that. So if you look at they call it chase percentage, which is just outside, swinging at pitches not in the strike zone. And the graph for him early in his career, 40% or something like that. It was ugly. Then he got to a point where he still wasn't walking a lot, but he had toned that down. Now he's toned that down a lot. And then you add in what you said, which I think is certainly true, which is, at this point, the league knows that this is not the Byron Buxton from 6 years ago.
Yeah, I was dead set against him being a leadoff hitter because he's just got so much power. I want to wait till people are on base. It feels to me like they need to protect him in the lineup a little bit at this point, especially when you've got both Polanco and Correa batting in front of him, and you don't have anybody when you've got Larnach batting behind him, especially the way Larnach's been recently. It feels like they get to anywhere near 3-1, 3-2. Basically, they get to the point where, okay, I've got to give in to this guy. Nah. We'll take my chances on something off the outside of the plate and see what happens.
As John dies for the fifth time this episode. Go ahead and get that. Go to the hospital. Feel free to get that checked.
It's a broken nose. It's a deviated septum from college. What I got.
If I re-break your nose, will it help?
We can give it a pull.
Okay. Hold on a second. Ooh, that was yeah. Oh, he's crying now. There's a lot of blood there. But anyway, yeah, well, he's been leading off or hitting like fourth. They've kind of bounced him back and forth. First of all, line of protection is not a thing. I get what you're saying, but it's generally not a thing. Taking walks is fine if they want to walk him a billion times.
It's fine, but
put one of the fastest base runners in the league on base, that's great too.
When you get a dude with a 1,200 OPS, you don't want to. I mean, you do want to walk him, but you'd like to have somebody to make them pay for walking him.
Well, sure. Right. Except also he has 9 homers, including like 5 in huge spots, so he's getting enough pitches to hit. He's slugging .570 overall, and he has the third highest win probability added in the entire league among hitters, which means those hits and homers and walks are almost all coming in huge spots.
That, part of that is because, like we said, the rest of the offense isn't hitting, and the pitching staff has been really good. So it's almost always a close game. Right.
There's a lot of high leverage opportunities
you are correct.
To get here. Right. But that can cut both ways. So he's been just on absolute fire. Beyond that, he's played now 29 of the first 32 games, including 28 starts in the first 32 games. So that's over 90% of the games. It's 91, 92% of the games. He played 57% last year, 43% over the last 5 years combined. He's basically playing roughly twice as often as he has at any point in the last 5 years. And yet, every game, well, what about if they played him in center? And here's what I'll say about that. I do think he's going to play some center field at some point this season.
Do too.
But I don't think it's going to be real soon. And I don't quite understand the disconnect that people have. There's half of the equation everyone seems to grasp, which is by playing him at DH exclusively so far, you're playing Michael Taylor as the everyday center fielder with some Nick Gordon mixed in, but you're basically
a little more lately, but yeah,
right, which has been productive too.
Yes.
The defensive downgrade is minimal, if anything, because Michael Taylor's really good in center field. But the offensive upgrade is not anything to do with Buxton. It's the fact that you're essentially swapping out whoever you'd have in the DH spot, which you're going to presume is a bigger bat, because that's what DHs typically are. You know, it might be someone like Kirilloff, for instance.
Right.
And you're swapping that for Taylor and Gordon, and you're going to lose offense there. That's half of the equation that everyone seems to understand, and that's absolutely part of the decision-making process there. Yes, we're keeping Buxton healthy, but by doing so, we're basically turning the DH spot into Michael Taylor and Gordon from offensively. But what I don't get is no one seems to recognize that it's not an apples for apples thing with Buxton. You can't just say, well, yeah, why don't they move him to center field?
And he can still play 90% of the games.
He can still play 90% of the games and slug .570, and then we can also fill the DH spot. Well, that's not what's going to happen.
Right.
Even if he stays healthy in center field, which he's yet to do at any point in the last 5 years, he's going to take 1 or 2 days off per week. It's going to be 3 games on, 1 game off. You're still going to have DH work mixed in there. And as we've seen, it just greatly increases his odds of getting hurt, whether it's short-term, long-term, whatever it is. And so whatever math you're doing in your head, which is right, which is saying, you know, they're giving up the DH spot to basically bring in offense from center field. That's the flip side of it. You also have to say, well, what would the impact on Buxton's offense be, or availability be, or production be, and value? And whatever that is, he's at the 100th percentile right now. He's playing almost literally every day, and he's been one of the best hitters in all of baseball. He's still making a big impact as a base runner. He's just not adding anything defensively, except they're not really missing that defensively because Taylor's really good. You're missing offense with the center field DH swap involving Taylor, except you're making up for most of that and maybe even all of that by having Buxton play 92% of the games.
Especially when Taylor's been as good as he's been.
Yeah, although he hasn't
been exceptional, but he's been solid.
Which is why I think the Gordon emerging
during
as
this
a
series.
kind of not quite a platoon partner for Taylor, but against righties or tough righties.
Yeah.
Or you can make in-game moves like they have in pinch hit Gordon against righty relievers late in games. Adds another dimension to the center field thing, so that it's not just trotting out Michael Taylor 155 times.
Yes,
because if you do that,
right-handers, right? Yeah.
as we've seen, it's not going to be real pretty offensively. The question for me becomes, is this the whole season? Is there sort of a point physically or weather-wise or schedule-wise where they're kind of looking...
Or
roster-wise, yeah.
Right.
Where they're looking and saying, well, maybe Buxton can play center field against lefties. Or, so you can stack Taylor in a corner spot against lefties or whatever. Or maybe...
I was thinking versus righties. Versus lefties, you can have Taylor. You're going to put him in the lineup one way or the other. He might as well be playing center field, and you can still have Buxton at DH. Well, you're right, though. You could put Taylor in one of the corner spots. Yeah, that's a fair point, too.
So I'm curious to reach that point. But in the meantime, it's such a strange thing to obsess on. And I get it. He's the most obsessed on player in the last 10 years for the Twins. And I get it that it's a sort of, point of disagreement for everyone just in general, injuries. But I don't know how you could ever say, having watched Byron Buxton over these last 30-something games, that he would provide...
This is a bad move.
Right. And that there's a scenario where he would have provided more value to a team just by playing defense. I think this has been... I'm not going to say it's the best we've ever seen Byron Buxton be, because Byron Buxton is such a spectacular unicorn of a player. He's had months where he wins Player of the Month, and 2 Aprils ago had what I believe is the best month in the history of the Minnesota Twins. So we've seen this before. We just haven't seen this before for 6 weeks, playing 90% of the games.
Yeah, you mentioned that Player of the Month was, in April.
Right.
And it'll be interesting to see how his body holds up at the DH versus playing in center field. When I read that story by Dan Hayes this week, right, about
who's this? Dan Hayes.
Dan Hayes.
Who's he write for? Who he write for?
I was some rag. The
Twins Daily.
I thought about
or not that bad.
a little touch below that.
Okay.
I thought back to the conversations we had with him in spring training, right? Which was
with Buxton or Dan?
With both,
okay.
But actually,
much different
in
conversations.
particular, I think Buxton was there because Buxton was talking about how much he wants to play center field. Like that. Right. That has been sort of my takeaway from that. Reading that, my thought process was, this feels like a guy who likes not being in severe pain every day.
Yeah, he likes not having to show up 2 hours early to go work on his legs just so he can play at 85% at night.
I mean, I think when you deal with, specifically last year, where he spent the whole year in pain, trying to work through stuff and playing at a level that he wasn't particularly satisfied with a lot of the time. That was clear in the narrative that he put out there. That at some point you're kind of like, this. It's funny how it's hard to take away something from somebody like that. When you take away they don't want to give up playing center field. Sure. It was clear in spring training he didn't want to give up.
Well, that's been his identity.
And then when he lets go of it for a little while, and he's like, "Oh, this comes with me being a really good hitter."
Yes, and not feeling like crap after every game,
and not dealing with day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute pain all the freaking time in my legs. Well, this isn't so bad.
And also, I think it's one thing to say to a guy in mid-March, we're going to not play you at center field initially, and your reaction to that, if you're the center fielder, is like, oh, that sucks. I can't add value defensively. His point was, if I go 0 for 4 in a game, at least I can make a catch out in center field that can help the team. But I think he's now come to realize, it's not just to kind of protect my legs and all that. I can play like almost every day this way,
and I feel great.
Well, right,
and I'm hitting well, and I mean,
so I think
it feels like he's under kind of a personal philosophy thing on this thing that gets to the point where it's like, which is not to say I don't think he'll ever play center field again for the Twins or even this year. I think he will, but I think he's kind of getting to the point where I don't have to play center field all the time to be valuable. You know what I mean? Like, like I say, it's hard for people to give up something that they've been so attached to.
Right.
But sometimes they live without it for a while, and then they're like,
But when you can show them proof of concept
right.
in a month and say you've played almost literally every day, he's essentially gotten 3 days off, which is a normal number of days off
Right.
for any position player other than some kind of Iron Man who's trying to play every day.
Right.
You take 1 out of every dozen games off or something like that.
Right.
And even then, at least one of them, he came off the bench and pinch hit, which at times last year he was unavailable to even do that. I think it's a good sign within that. Like you're saying, it's a good sign that he's attempted 2 steals the last few games.
Right. Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah.
I don't really want to see that. I don't think it's worth it. The juice is not worth the squeeze
right.
in his particular case.
But
But
risk reward on that is not what you.
yeah, I mean,
right.
to me, it's irrelevant. He has the highest success rate on stolen bases in the history of Major League Baseball. He's like essentially 90%. Like he's literally the best, most efficient base stealer ever for guys who have, stolen at least, 75 bases or something like that in history. And so it's not about that. Like when he, even at, 90% or 80%, when he decides to take off, he's going to be safe an overwhelming majority of the time. So it's not a risk in that regard, like from a win probability standpoint or a run expectancy standpoint. He's so rarely thrown out that it is worth it. I just think to myself, how many times is he going to slide into second base before he gets up slowly after one of them, in which case was it worth it? But we'll see. It's a good sign in general. It's an indicator of
how he's feeling
better,
right.
And also their willingness to let him have a green light on the bases too.
Right. And also when he's doing that, it isn't in a 4-0 game when they're up by 4 runs.
Well,
and
that's true.
He's doing it when it's a late inning. We've got to.
But what I'm saying is like the leverage of that game is the risk reward, but only on a macro or on micro level. I'm thinking like on a big picture level.
I'm just
what the risk reward. I agree.
It does give you a little bit more reward when he's actually choosing to do it than your average stolen base.
Except if you said to me, if he never stole a base again, he'd be 5% less likely to be injured. I'd go, yeah, that's great. No matter what the leverage of it was. The other we mentioned Kirilloff. So actually, before we get to Kirilloff, let's talk about our next sponsor, which is Stamps.com. I've told this story before, but I had never used Stamps.com before until like 4 years ago, something like that, when I wrote a book about the Twins called The Big 50, Men and Moments That Made the Minnesota Twins. And I had the brilliant idea of, what if I took all these books that they gave me? They give you a bunch of when you write a book, they give you a whole bunch of copies of the book to give family members or do whatever you want. And I said, what if I autograph these and people can send me, I think it was $20 or something. The book was like $18, so there was no profit to be made really. And I'll autograph it and send it to you.
Right.
And I thought, maybe 50 people will want that, right? I bought a bunch of replica Harmon Killebrew cards off eBay, a 50 pack, and I included one in each thing. And then a day in, there was 500 orders, and I thought, oh no! And my girlfriend,
that's a lot more Harmon Killebrew cards.
Yeah, I had to buy a lot more Harmon Killebrew cards,
but it also means a lot more shipping.
Yeah, my girlfriend was like, wait, so what's the process going to be like, and where are you doing this? And I said, you see that table over there in our kitchen? That's now the post office or the assembly line. And so
but it became the post office.
Yes, thankfully via Stamps.com, which I learned about a few years ago, you can basically track and manage that sort of thing online to the point that you can have individual tracking numbers on every book or item you send out, so that if someone says, hey, I haven't gotten mine yet, you can say, oh, it's on the way, going to be there tomorrow, or you actually got it delivered and maybe something went wrong. It's super easy to do the exact postage, so you're not overpaying just for ease of slapping a bunch of stamps on there. And then the biggest time saver for me was when you're doing hundreds of things and it's different every day, you make one big trip to the post office, or you don't even have to go to the post office because it's all got the proper labeling and shipping and packaging. You just drop it in whatever in your building or across the street, wherever it is. That saved me 1,000 trips to the post office. So I am a believer in Stamps.com. I was a power user for a few months of Stamps.com.
And you can set your business up for success when you get started with Stamps.com today. You just sign up with the promo code GEEK. Not Gleeman. Geek.
Yeah.
For a special offer, it includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage, and a free digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, and enter the code GEEK.
Our next sponsor is Raycon, and I just had somebody reach out to me and say, hey, I need some new earbuds. What's the sponsor you guys have had for a long time? And I told them, buyraycon.com /Gleeman. Raycon, we both use it.
Right.
John and Chrissy use it to go running because one of the selling points of Raycon is the actual feel in your ear, like the physical mold of the earbud is much more comfortable than
Chrissy's
some of the...
very picky about that, and she loves them.
Especially if you're going to wear it either on a long run or you're going to do a Zoom meeting for 3 hours with it, which is what we use it for in my household. And it's a lower price point than some of the bigger names.
But every bit as well engineered or better.
Yes.
Right.
And long-lasting battery. It's super easy to sync it with Bluetooth, even for dummies like me who are not good at that sort of thing.
50,000 five-star reviews they've got. Yeah.
So if you want to pick up a pair of earbuds and give it a try, wireless earbuds from Raycon, you go to buyraycon. That's BUYRAYCON. buyraycon.com /Gleeman. That'll get you 15% off your Raycon order. That's buyraycon.com /Gleeman to score 15% at buyraycon.com /Gleeman. Okay, we mentioned Kirilloff, who's in some ways related to the Buxton at DH thing, but this is somewhat, this situation I think has somewhat changed in the last, 10 days or so.
Yeah.
They officially, the window for his rehab assignment officially closed after 20 days, which means they had to do the procedural move of activating him from the injured list and optioning Kirilloff to AAA, which means he's no longer a rehabbing major leaguer. He's just a AAA player, just like everyone else. Mm-hmm. Him and Ed Julian and Matt Wallner and on are just straight up AAA players. The other thing that's changed, he continues to be productive at AAA, although he continues to play not quite every other day, maybe 2 out of every 3 games as they kind of limit his workload.
4 times every 6 games. It's a 6-week league,
like
6-week games in the AAA.
But the thing that has really changed, and what we talked about on the last free show, I think, on this topic was everyone wants to see Kirilloff healthy and in the majors. Most of all, the Minnesota Twins want to see that. Right. They've been hyping him up and believing in him and waiting on him for 5 years now, basically, as a part of their middle of the lineup. They called him up to make his debut in a playoff game, which is basically unheard of because they believed in him so much 2-3 years ago. But the fact that he's had back-to-back seasons ruined by wrist surgery and is still a question mark from a physical standpoint and is still sort of trying to get back into form, whatever that means after significant wrist surgeries, is part of the reason why he's not playing every day at AAA, but it's also part of the reason he's just at AAA. Right. The other reason is he plays 4 positions, potentially, or 4 spots in the lineup. One of them is DH, which is filled by Byron Buxton, who's been the Twins' best player. The other 3 are first base, left field, right field. All 3 of those are manned right now for the Twins by left-handed hitters, which he's one. Joey Gallo, who's slumped recently but been one of the Twins' better players this year, has been playing primarily first base, kind of platooning with Donovan Solano.
And playing really well defensively.
Right, playing good defensively. Trevor Larnach, a left-handed hitter who's a year older than Kirilloff, but was also a former first-round pick and a highly touted prospect, has been playing primarily in left field. And then Max Kepler, who's been their right fielder for 7 years now, is still their right fielder. 10 days ago, we said, well, where's Kirilloff going to play, and who are you pushing out of the lineup at those 3 spots? Because Buxton's not going anywhere right now. And at the time, Gallo was slugging .800 at first base, and Trevor Larnach had a 110 OPS plus in left field, and Max Kepler was on a nice little hot streak coming off the IL, and he had, 120 OPS plus or something like that, along with the good defense. And so you said, we could call Kirilloff up, but you might only be playing him a couple times a week, and you're going to have to sit someone else, and it just became complicated, and you added in the injury factor and the availability factor, and I think it was pretty straightforward to send him to AAA. But what has changed since then is Kepler's cooled off a little bit, which is not unexpected to me and probably you also. Right. But the bigger change has been Larnach has really struggled.
Well, he just had a terrible series.
He went 0 for 9 with 8 strikeouts against Chicago. And the interesting thing about that is I've talked in the past, I wrote about it 2 weeks ago, about how he really struggles against off-speed stuff and always has. And the league knows that. And he, as of 2 weeks ago, had seen the fewest percentage of fastballs of any hitter in the world. 40% or 39% or something. But what's interesting about going 0 for 9 with 8 strikeouts against the White Sox, they threw him a lot of fastballs. Yeah. They threw him I think 61% fastballs. Yeah. 33 out of the 50, I want to say 33 out of the 54 pitches he saw, and he still went 0 for 9 with 8 strikeouts, still swung through a lot of them, still had some really rough at-bats.
I saw the same thing, and I was torn between, is he just stuck looking for off-speed pitches? But he was often in counts where you were pretty sure it wasn't going to be an off-speed pitch. You were facing a pitcher who's having trouble throwing an off-speed pitch, and they're getting him a lot of times on fastball up. Right. He was chasing something a little bit high. I mean, here's the thing. Like for 3 weeks, he's been 3-4 weeks. He's been treading water. He had about a 700 OPS about mid-April. He's got about a 700 OPS right now. Right. That's it's gone up a little bit. Like I showed a little bit of life versus the Yankees, then came back down a little bit. When you're at that point, if something happens that suddenly you have trouble catching up with a fastball, your back's a little sore, something like that happens, there's just not a lot of room for error.
Don't say back sore, because then people think you mean his back is sore.
No, I'm not. I'm just saying that.
Just clarifying.
He's
had a lot of injuries.
Listen, I am not saying that. I'm not saying I know that he's got an injury or anything like that. What I'm saying is that when something happens that you suddenly have trouble catching up with a fastball, whatever it is, you just don't have a lot of room for error. And right now, he's just not. He doesn't have a lot of room for error, and he's erroring.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because he continues to bat fourth a lot.
Yeah, that's weird to me.
Which is odd. I mean, against righties, which makes some sense. But they haven't moved Gallo really up in the lineup, although Gallo hasn't been very good for the last week or so either. Yeah. I think your point about Larnach is accurate, except I will say if you just look at his game logs, he had a really good first 4 games, including a 3-run homer in Miami. Right. Since then, he's hit like 170. Yeah. And he's hit 170 with very little power. He only has 3 homers all year. And he's like 150-something games into his major league career, and I think he has 15 homers. Right. It just doesn't match the type of player he is, the size he is, the swing he has, the strikeout rate, which is really the problem, which is he swings through a lot of pitches. Now, off speed especially, but as we've seen now, he swings through a lot of fastballs too. He is a big, slugger, 6'5" slugger swing. It's producing the strikeouts you would expect from that type of approach, but it is not producing the power you would expect from that type of approach. And, his value really this season has been based on drawn walks. Which for a middle of the lineup hitter who's not the fastest of foot has pretty minimal value. Now it's great to draw walks versus not drawing walks, but that's what's propping up his production to the extent that it's at least been sort of average-ish. Right. That he's not really hitting and not hitting for any power whatsoever, and as we've seen, like he's very strikeout prone, and the quality of at bats, I don't think he takes bad at bats. I think he doesn't fully kind of maximize hitters counts because he either can't square the ball up or he gets in a hitters count and he still swings through a pitch that should still be taken.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I mean, I didn't feel like it's rare that I take a look at him and goes, that was just a bad at bat, right? Where he just chased 3 pitches that were not particular. It wasn't a competitive at bat.
He can get in good
fooled,
spots.
Right? Yeah,
he just doesn't seem able to take advantage of it. Yeah, full advantage of it.
I feel exactly the same way. He gets to a 2-2, 3-2 count, something like that, and then it just doesn't go the way you were hoping. Right.
Or he'll swing through pitches, which, guys do that. Gallo does that. Sano did that. Buxton does that a lot. Right. But he also will get frozen on pitches in the zone because I think he's, in his mind, choosing fastball or breaking ball a lot of times. Yeah. He's hitting 221, a lot of walks, but a 356 slugging percentage. You just can't. Now, look, it's a small sample, except this is the 3rd year in a row where this has sort of been stylistically what we've seen. There's been injuries involved in the previous 2 years.
That's a good point, too.
But, I mean, he's a guy who's going to draw some walks. When he gets into a pitch, he's capable of crushing a 450-foot homer. I mean, we've seen some monster homers to center field and to left center from Trevor Larnach where you go, oh, yeah, he's a slugger, except the overall slugging is just not there. And even if you look back at AAA and AA, he's not a guy who has produced big-time power numbers. And so I just wonder at some point, does the look and feel of Larnach stylistically have to kind of go to the wayside, and you have to look at him realistically and say, he swings and misses a lot, but the power isn't there, and he puts the ball on the ground a lot for a guy who should be a power hitter. But so the reason why all this is relevant.
I love it. I've just one more point on that. I mean, I still kind of believe that he is that player. I also think back to the fact that he admitted in spring training that he's not always forthright about how he's feeling. Right, that he tried to play through various maladies in the past. In the first week or so of spring training, he voluntarily said, hey, you know what? I've got a twinge in my oblique again. I know I've got to be careful with that because it cost me the whole season last year. And I think that's one of the reasons why he came into April tearing it up a little bit. I just wonder if the grind of the season is wearing him down a little bit too. So, but it's early in the season. So
what's interesting about this and why, I mean, he's directly linked to Kirilloff, because if Kirilloff had been healthy at the end of spring training, or if they had deemed him ready to go at the end of spring training, which they didn't, he didn't even play in the minors for a couple weeks to begin the season. I don't think Larnach would have been on the opening day roster. And so it was the removal of Kirilloff from the opening day roster as a first baseman DH left fielder, left-handed bat, that opened up that spot for Larnach, who, is a very similar type of player. So in that sense, if Kirilloff is now healthy and productive at AAA and ready to join the lineup,
which we're not totally sure of, right? Yeah,
but it would make sense then that the guy you remove from the roster to make room for that is the guy who got the roster spot because of Kirilloff's status in the first place. And it's not as if Larnach has really, fought that as well as he should have.
2 weeks into the season, you would have been crazy to suggest that is the case. Because why would you take out one of your better hitters who seems to be a breakthrough 6-year-old or whatever he is?
Right.
Now it feels like, well,
it's tough though, because there's not a real. I would want them both in the lineup.
Right.
The goal would be, you have these two former first round picks. Right. You want both of them to be part of your longish term lineup, and so they both need to be playing every day. But because they have Gallo, and because they signed Gallo, and because they chose not to trade Kepler, you're in a spot where you, right now at least, can't realistically have them both in the lineup every day. And so I just wonder, how long do they view Larnach as like an impediment or a speed bump for Kirilloff? How long do they view Larnach as any part of the decision-making with Kirilloff, as opposed to at some point, if Larnach does not turn it around very quickly here, then you're just saying, is Kirilloff ready or not?
Right.
If he's ready, then Larnach can be sent. They can just swap them, and Larnach can take some time at AAA and try to get on track. And then by the time that happens, hopefully a month later, then maybe the outfield situation has changed, or somebody's hurt, or somebody's struggling, and it makes it obvious. Or Kirilloff might be re-injured, in which case this is all a moot point, and you just bring Larnach back. But
it's worth watching, because I feel like the same. That's all true, and I agree with you. Like, if Larnach continues to, especially if he's as brutal as we've seen the last 3, 4, 5 days, right? Yeah. You probably need to make a change there. But I think the same thing applies that we talked about 2 weeks ago when we first started talking about Kirilloff coming back, which is like, is Larnach really going to learn anything in AAA? Like, it's not one thing to say, he's going to get back on track, but is he?
No, but you got to produce at some point, right? I mean, he's 26. This is his third season.
Maybe get his confidence back up a little bit. I don't know.
And you can, I don't think he's going to like.
The problem is he's not going to see as many good breaking balls in AAA as he is here.
But he's going to play every day, and I don't think at some point, if he continues to struggle, they can't afford to play him every day. I mean, do you know that they have the worst OPS from left fielders of any team in baseball right now?
I believe it.
Now, some of that's Gordon too, but
I know the two guys who are leading the team in games played are Miranda and Larnach, and the two guys I'm most worried about right now in terms of their offensive production.
So yeah, I think that has now kind of bled in more to the Kirilloff situation than it did 10 days ago. And again, these are all small samples, and it's all dependent on Kirilloff's health. If they just don't think Kirilloff is ready, then it's a moot point. Right. But if they do think Kirilloff is ready and he continues to be productive at AAA, I do think swapping him for Larnach is no longer sort of a questionable thing. I think that would be the most straightforward thing they could do.
Here's the thing. If they believe Kirilloff is ready, I think we'll see that, because he'll be playing 5 games a week or 6 games a week, not 4 games a week, right? If he's going to stay at 4 games a week, that suggests he's not ready. Because when he comes up here, he ain't playing 4 games a week.
He probably will, though, because they're going to face lefties. He won't start against lefties.
Yeah,
I mean, Larnach's only playing 4 to 5 times a week, too. Right?
They just haven't faced many lefties. Like I said, Larnach leads the team in games played. So, that's now I don't know if that's in games started, but I know he leads the team in games played. So that's a lot of playing.
But also, they still have Gordon as a left-handed bat, too,
yeah.
who could play left field if you need that. So, I don't know. I think I want to see Kirilloff. I want to see them both. I think it would be beneficial for them long-term to see them both. But sending down Larnach or swapping them, basically, in terms of where they are in the organization, doesn't preclude Larnach from coming back in 3 weeks or a month if he puts together a good stretch at AAA. I just, at some point and I'm a believer in Larnach. I think he's a smart guy. I think he has a tool set that can work. I think he's a much better defensive player than he gets credit for. I think he is just potentially a prototypical like number 5, hitting left fielder.
Right.
But at some point, you can talk about injuries, you can talk about opportunities and all that.
Right.
He's like 160 games and 3 seasons into his major league career, and he's really yet to have a sustained, more than a month, or in some cases a week, where he's just an asset consistently for the lineup. And at some point, I mean, this is the thing when you draft college players, which he was a superstar at Oregon State.
Right.
The timeline in terms of patience, we saw it with Brent Rooker, unfortunately, who's now having age 29 or whatever breakout for Oakland. But when you draft a guy and he's already like 23, 24 years old in some cases, like with Rooker, you can't just give them like 6 years.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's kind of where Larnach is at. Like if he were 24, you might be like, well, okay, send him to triple. He's running out of
running on a road
space here. He's running out of. So we'll see. Before we talk a little bit about the rotation and some other notes to finish up here, let's talk about our last couple of sponsors. Native,
which now we always do with deodorant.
They can keep you smelling good. They can also keep you from getting burned all summer.
That's right. We just got some Native sunscreen. I tried it this week when we finally saw the sun. Mm-hmm. It's quick absorbing, good SPF 30 protection, smells great. I got the coconut and pineapple, which Chrissy appreciates, and it has all the same stuff going for it that the deodorant has. Like you doesn't have the odd stuff in there and such that you don't want to know about it.
You can actually look at the list of ingredients and recognize that they're things that you've heard about before, as opposed to...
It's free of chemical additives. It says, I'll read it from the talking points. It's free of chemical actives, oxybenzone, octinoxate, and avobenzone.
Oh, those familiar words.
You don't have to have that stuff on your screen, right?
So give your skin the protection it deserves with Native's mineral sunscreens. Go to Native DEO like deodorant, nativedeo.com/Gleeman. Use the promo code Gleeman at checkout, and you will get 20% off your first order. That's nativedeo.com/Gleeman. Use the promo code Gleeman at checkout. nativedeo.com.
Go get out there in the sun and use some sunscreen.
And our last sponsor is MyBookie.
That's right.
So MLB is back in full swing, obviously. MyBookie can be your one-stop shop for all your betting needs with a wide range of betting options, including money lines, run totals, futures. MyBookie gives you plenty of ways to bet on your favorite teams and players.
Yeah, you can also take advantage of brand new MyBookie Money Bag, which gives you the chance to secure a bet on your favorite team or player at insanely boosted odds. You just sign up today at MyBookie and use the promo code Gleeman, and you secure a first deposit bonus of up to $1,000. It's simple. Just deposit $200 and play with $300 instantly. Just use the promo code Gleeman to claim your bonus.
So if you're a baseball fan looking to add some excitement for the season, look no further than MyBookie. Sign up now. Get ready to experience the thrill of baseball betting like never before. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.
Can you imagine how much more exciting the White Sox Twins games would have been if you also had money on those?
Sure. That would have driven me fully insane. Since last free episode, they officially placed Maeda and Maui on the IL,
right. Yep.
but we knew last Friday kind of what the situation is. There's no official timetable on Maeda. There is official timetable on Maui in that he's been shut down for a minimum of 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So there's like 3 weeks left of that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean he's going to jump into the rotation 3 weeks from now. That's fully shut down for 4 weeks means you're looking at several weeks to ramp back up and a rehab assignment and rejoining the rotation at some point after that. He's made 9 starts for the Twins since they traded 3 good prospects to get him. 3 of them he's left early with injuries. When he's not leaving starts early with injuries, he's been pretty good. I mean, you can certainly there's plenty of evidence of the pitcher they were hoping to get, which is he's got a good fastball. He generally throws strikes. He gives up a few too many homers, but I mean, he's a solid, I would say, number 2 or number 3 starter, even at whatever the diminished capacity's been. It's just you can no longer count on him at all, unfortunately.
I'll be interested to see in the second half of the season how this plays out. He comes back he gets the rest he needs, the inflammation or whatever he's dealing with goes down. What adjustments do they make to try and keep this stuff under control?
I don't know. So. All the talking points of last year of the lockout and the short spring, he didn't have time to build up shoulder strength and all that. Well, now it's his elbow. It's not even his shoulder.
Right. Yep.
I mean, it's all interconnected at some point. Obviously, if you have fatigue or if you have soreness in one area, you could be compensating for the other. But it's unfortunate. I mean, that trade was the biggest. They made 3 trades at the deadline, including the Lopez trade. But this trade was one of the bigger swings they've made. It's the biggest swing they've made at midseason in terms of trading Spencer Steer, Christian Encarnacion Strand, and Steve Hajar, left-handed pitcher. Steer is already the starting third baseman for the Reds, although he hasn't been particularly good. Encarnacion, I saw, had a 3-homer game yesterday at AAA, so he's going to be in the Reds lineup very soon. Hajar, they traded and hasn't pitched yet this year. But, that trade, it's already it's a bad trade. No matter what happens. Obviously, if Mahle comes back and they win the World Series.
Sure, right. Yeah,
but I'm just saying,
dominant.
Realistically, they've already ruled out getting back from that trade what they hope to get back from that trade. Right. He might have, I don't know, a dozen starts left in a Twins uniform if things go reasonably well. He's only made, like I said, 9 so far. Right. I mean, when they traded for him, they were hoping he would make 40-something starts in a Twins uniform for that trade. Instead, he's at 9, and getting much past 9 is very much up in the air. As it's one of those trades where it's already not good. It was risky at the time, but I think we agreed, people have been clamoring for them to go get some frontline pitching, and they did it. Yeah. I think it made sense. But, when you start to deal with injured pitchers,
it just didn't work.
Stuff evaporates in a hurry. And so, it's one of those trades where it already looks bad, and it's not going to get better probably because the future value part of the trade is going to always favor the Reds. Yeah. That's when you trade prospects for veterans. So
it does give us a chance to see Ober. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him. He's definitely been a different pitcher second time through the order than the first time through the order. I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see if he gets to the point where he's a little bit more comfortable handling that and can get beyond 5.2 innings, which is where he's ended up the last couple tries. So
So the 2 injuries open the door, like you said, for Ober to replace Maeda, basically, and Varland to replace Mahle. And as a duo, if you would have set out a spring training, do you think the duo of Maeda and Mahle for, let's say, 50 starts is significantly better than the potential duo of Ober and Varland for 50 starts this season? I think was very debatable coming out of spring training. I think having seen the version of Maeda.
I had higher hopes for Mahle than you did, so I would have said yes. But
you mean to say I was the low man on Tyler Mahle all off season and all spring? Yeah, that's me. Low man on Tyler Mahle, which I suppose there's more company on that anti-bandwagon now. But I'll stay on there. I've been on there the whole time. But yeah, I think realistically, Ober is a better pitcher at this stage than Maeda until proven otherwise. Varland is much less proven than even Ober.
Sure.
And I do think Mahle, when healthy, is a good pitcher, but I didn't think Mahle was going to be healthy, and he isn't healthy now. So the nice part is they're turning to their 6th and 7th starter on the opening day depth chart, and their 6th and 7th starter would both have been in their opening day rotation for 75% of the league, Ober probably for 90% of the league. They're realistically more like a number 3 starter and a number 5 starter, let's say. Right. That's the good news. The other good news is, beyond this season, the odds were no matter what happened this season, both Maui and Maeda were going to be not on the Twins in 2024 and beyond because they're both impending free agents. The good news is if Ober and or Varland pitch well and stay healthy, you can start to map them out as part of a future rotation for years to come, especially in Varland's case. Yep. And so that's, I think, adds a dimension to as you evaluate these guys, which is,
where you do want to invest your innings.
Right.
Yeah.
And so to your point of what happens if Maui gets healthy in 6 weeks or what happens if Maeda in the second half is like, okay, I'm ready to return. I think there's, now odds are one of the 5 current starters will be hurt because as we've seen, starters get hurt. And so maybe that's a moot point. But I do think that if you are in July something and it's like Maeda's ready to return, I think there's a decent chance that the Twins are justified in saying, yeah, okay, but so what? Ober's better.
It's going to be a balancing act. I mean, it's always a balancing act into how much you invest in the future versus how much you play for the present. Right. But if the young guy is doing better in the present and provides more for the future,
then what's the argument for the other guy? Other than
the argument becomes, what the hell do we do with the roster spot? Are we ditching an asset here that we might need to have? What's Ober down to the first place? Ober down in the first place, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be very tough to send either of those guys back to AAA if they've had 10 good starts or something like that. Now, they have to have the 10 good starts first, so that's hardly guaranteed. Let's see, a couple other things. So now the next in line for the rotation are probably Brent Hedrick, and Simeon Woods-Richardson, which those are great number 7 and number 8 starters on a depth chart. They're not that great of 6, 7 starters.
Or 4 and 5, which is where they would end up with a couple more injuries.
Well, there's that John Bonus optimism that I like to see.
Right.
The Twins this season are 14-5 in games started by Pablo Lopez, Sonny Gray, or Joe Ryan.
Yeah.
They are 0-4 in Maeda's starts.
Yeah.
So that gives you a sense of, the extent to which good starting pitching has carried them and what happens when they don't get good starting pitching, basically. Let's see. A few other things we'll finish up here, just to cross all these things off the list. Not at the level of Buxton, obviously, but Correa is starting to pull the ball a little bit more, had a couple homers in this series. Still some weird at-bats, I would say. He seems to be taking a lot of fastballs for strikes and then having to chase later in at-bats because he's behind, which just to me is a guy who's just out of whack in general. But if you look at his numbers since he missed, 4 or 5 games with the back problems in mid-April, I think he's slugging like 430, something like that. He's got a 310 on-base percentage. He's had some bad luck in terms of balls in play. We saw that yesterday. He lined at one hopper to second, and it was a double play. Could have easily driven in a run there.
He's also basically started every game at shortstop since Farmer got hurt,
which has been essential for them because the backup shortstop is either Nick Gordon or Willie Castro, which you don't want to play a full game with at that point. So that's been big for them. Miranda had 3 homers in 4 games and then went right back to all the bad things that we've seen for most of the season.
I'll tell you, his throws across the diamond, not really gunning it from third base to first base. I'm wondering, he had that shoulder problem in spring training.
So it's a weird thing because it's like, is it the shoulder or is it just that he doesn't have a good arm? Because that's also true.
But I thought he had a lot more zip on that ball
earlier
in the season than he has recently. So,
well, that's not good because he was supposedly healthier. Like, he shouldn't be less healthy now than he was.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right. Well, I mean, if he's hurt again with the shoulder, he ought not to be playing. I think that becomes potentially a factor if Kyle Farmer is back as soon as they think he could be back, because Kyle Farmer has started a rehab assignment with St. Paul. He's played now 2 games or 3 games. And with Farmer, there's no – I don't mean to be insensitive, but there's no normal injury here that he has to, test out.
Right.
It's a facial and teeth and dental injury. Now, there's a kind of psychological component of how does he react when he gets a curveball that makes his knees buckle from a right-handed pitcher the first time.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a component. But he basically just needs some at-bats and to kind of get back into playing shape.
Right.
It's not, I have to test my elbow or I have to make sure my hamstring's fine or like Kirilloff, I have to make sure my wrist doesn't start hurting. he's got bigger issues than that. I mean, believe me, I saw the pictures and I talked to him a week after, and it was his face is a disaster zone. And now he's back to looking like he said, my normal pretty self.
And
but
that's coming from two guys whose faces are a disaster.
yeah, my face all day, every day is a disaster zone, and nothing even happened to me. I was just born like this. This is just hard living. That's 40 years of hard living. So yeah, when he comes back, obviously the move to make straightforward would be Willie Castro. But then beyond that, if he's your backup shortstop, do you feel more comfortable talking about what's with Miranda? Now, Miranda's got a week or 10 days or something to get back on track and make that a moot point. But I think that's worth watching. Similar to the Larnach Kirilloff situation, a little bit worth watching. Yeah. Nick Gordon snapping out of what was a horrendous slump to begin the season.
What a pickup he was this week.
All the expected numbers with him early in the season, I think his expected batting average at one point was 270 and his actual batting average was like 090.
Right.
And he's a believer in that because I remember last year I talked to him about that David Popkins.
It's easy to believe in that when you're 170 points below it.
But last year Popkins talked to him about that and the same thing happened, which was he kept telling him, your expected slugging is great. Keep doing what you're doing. And then in the second half, we saw the numbers start to even out a little bit. So if he starts to play a little bit more in center field against righties.
Well, especially given the fact that Taylor had a sore back a little bit, so it's giving Taylor a chance to not. Taylor also one of the guys who's played the most games for the Twins up to this point. I don't think that was ever really part of the plan. So
where the Miranda thing really could come to a head is with Royce Lewis in a month from now, let's say, optimistically.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because it's one thing to say we have Kyle Farmer available to play third base, who's a borderline starting caliber player, really good backup, but a borderline starter. It's another thing to say if Miranda's hitting 220 with a 600 OPS and Royce Lewis is raring to go, then that becomes I would say a pretty easy decision at that point. But that's probably a month away. Let's see. There was one other thing I wanted to say. Maybe not.
Brooks Lee's still doing pretty well, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. Another guy.
Still doing pretty well, like as in you're going to be saying that for like 20 years. If that's your approach to Brooks Lee.
310 batting average right now in Tulsa, yeah.
So he's playing shortstop.
I'm just making sure he's still healthy.
Wichita, not Tulsa.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. He's been good. Not amazing, but good. Heating up a little bit, hitting a lot of doubles, not striking out very much. Let's see. They sent Trevor McGill to the Brewers. We talked more about that on the Patreon side. Let's see. Trevor McGill fumbled the bag in modern day. This is what the kids say, right? Kids from 10
fumbled the bag.
Yeah. He had the money.
Is that
he had the bag and he fumbled it. I think I'm using that correctly. I'm 40 years old, and I wasn't cool when I was 20, so I'm certainly not cool when I'm 40. They gave Trevor McGill every opportunity to be in this bullpen coming out of spring training, and at every turn he screwed it up on and off the field, and then he got sent to AAA and screwed it up even more, and now he's out of the organization. So we'll see what happens to him in Milwaukee. Brock Stewart, who essentially replaced him, looked pretty good from a stuff standpoint. The question with him, I think, is just can he throw strikes consistently? Because Brock Stewart,
he has been
has throwing 97.
Yeah,
I'm not,
especially for somebody who just. Well, I mean, it's not like he doesn't have any major league experience. We should just give a little bit of background.
It was bad experience.
But 2016 through 2019 or something, he was a reliever with the Dodgers, kind of a swingman with the Dodgers, and didn't out of baseball. He's 30 some years old. He's not a young 25-year-old, 26-year-old guy.
Is that the word you were looking for?
Well, what I was trying to say is, he's not somebody who's been considered a prospect up to this point,
or
something like that. Yeah, right. Once upon a time, he was. But seeing him perform, getting back here and occasionally dealing with the walk in an inopportune place or something like that, but he definitely has the stuff to strike guys out, which is why he got out of a couple jams. If you showed
this version of Brock Stewart to Dodgers fans, they would not recognize him. Because he was 91, 92 with the fastball. Now he's 97 with the fastball. Just completely different pitcher. Let's see. I had one
after Tommy John.
It's after Tommy John and then another elbow problem after that. Last thing, and then we're done. Can you remember so far back as a month ago? And all the probably not, actually. And all the talk of Max Kepler's batting average on balls in play and the shift
Yeah.
and all this stuff.
Yeah.
He's hitting 233. His career average is 232. He has one of the lowest batting averages on balls in play in all of Major League Baseball, just very slightly higher than his career mark.
Yeah.
And he's had some hits. Because people remind me of this because I've made the same rant before.
Right.
Every time he singles on a ground ball anywhere, I get 10 tweets telling me, see, that fixed by the shift. And I just want to say now, okay, I'll buy into that. How's he still hitting 233 then, if that's the case?
He's got OPS plus of over 100 now. He's had a decent run since he came back from the injury.
Well, I can tell you his OPS plus was 130 like 7 days ago, and now it's 108 or something like that. But he's been fine. He's been Max Kepler. They knew what they were getting by bringing him back. There was maybe some optimism that he could take it to another level. It's still early, obviously, but it's the thing we talked about with him all offseason, really, which is, yeah, he's going to get a few singles here or there that that would have been outs under a normal situation. But A, they still shift him.
Yes, right.
They're not shifting.
Right,
It's just not quite as extreme of a shift. And B, and this is what I've tried to preach about Max Kepler for 5 years, it's not the shift that is killing him. It's the type of balls he puts in play that
Even
are
Max
killing
Kepler
him.
said that as preacher.
Right.
Even Max Kepler said something like, I only get a couple of ground balls through the right field.
Here's the thing.
Right.
If you're a corner outfielder and you're banking on the outcome of ground balls to the second base side fixing you, you're beyond being fixed at that point. And he still pops the ball up a lot. He
lot
still
of fly balls.
hits choppers and weak fly balls and
Center field.
essentially automatic outs to the point that the strikeout rate is meaningless. And so I don't know. It's very early, and maybe he goes on a stretch here where 2 weeks from now I'm saying, oh my God, he's hitting 275 and
He's frozen ropes everywhere. Right.
But just a reminder that wish fulfillment doesn't go that far in baseball. You can say, oh my God, the shifts are banned. No, they're not banned. Oh my God, that's going to lead to 50 new hits. No, I think we cited the math on it was like maybe 7 singles for him for a year. I remember talking about this.
Ultimately, we did talk about it a little bit, and I've saw various different estimates, including some from within the Twins organization, based on studies and such, that had anywhere from like 7 to 27, right? New singles. But the problem is that they're all singles, first of all.
Right.
Right. That, this isn't going to be something that boosts, it helps batting average boosts on base percentage. And we're double a point on OPS.
But yes, like I said, if you're banking on ground ball singles saving you, you're in big trouble. So again, as we talk about Kirilloff and we talk about Larnach and we talk at some point about Wallner, who's playing very well at AAA right now, the Kepler situation will remain a situation. I think is the best way to put it. Okay.
But Kepler's protected by Larnach right now.
Yeah. That's like I say before. If you're being attacked, if you're in the woods and a bear is attacking you, you do not have to run faster than the bear.
Right.
You just have to run faster than the person next to you.
That's right.
And he's running slightly faster than Trevor Larnach as the Alex Kirilloff
Which
bear
of us would
chases
run
him.
faster than the other if we were being chased by a bear right now?
I gotta hope you, because you actually run,
Well,
right?
yeah, but I'm not a speed guy.
Am I a speed guy? Takes me 15 minutes to stand up.
Which of our knees would hold up more?
Not mine. By the way,
Bear would just get a twofer on that deal.
if you're on the fence about Bear's like, this is a lot to eat. I'll come
I'm just
back
going to
later.
swat you down and I'm going to come back and I'm going to get the other guy
It's
down.
like a buffet, all you can eat. If you were on the fence about joining the Patreon,
Yes.
patreon.com, patreon.com/Gleeman, this reminds me that on the Wednesday episode 2 days ago, we spent a solid 8 to 10 minutes analyzing which one of us would win in a fight, because that was a mailbag
That's right,
question.
yes, that's
and we
right.
really did a deep dive on
That's
it.
right.
And I think we concluded both of us would have a heart attack before the fight ended.
think that's about
And it would
right.
end in a draw, I think is what or no contest.
We
maybe.
will be back on Monday with a review of the Cleveland series. That's another thing you get at the Patreon. You can also, the Wednesdays, we're often doing a mailbag. You can get your questions into us, get them read.
Yeah, patreon.com/Gleeman. We would love to have you join us. You just pay $1 for new episodes when they come out. It's very simple, commercial free.
Yes.
A lot more deep dives and stuff and reactions right after games and all that.
But this episode was not commercial free, so we're going to just thank
Yeah,
my bookie
it's
and
opposite.
Native
Very
and
much not.
Raycon and stamps and Sunday, get Sunday.com, and then also Grody Beef. Right. And congratulations to David Campbell. It is
I've never heard anybody call him
$300
David before. That's interesting. Congratulations to Dave Campbell. I'm going to launch an investigation about this. I think this is like the quiz show thing from the 1960s where it's like something's afoot. We will be back, like John said, Monday for the Patreon subscribers, of which you should consider becoming one. And talk to you later.
Gleeman